There was a trade made on Wednesday morning in the NFL involving a former All-Pro wide receiver. And some Panther fans have asked me, should the Panthers have been involved in that trade? So we'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, like tomorrow, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. But of course, follow me first on Twitter to get your questions in for tomorrow's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We are 3 weeks away from the start of the 2024 NFL Draft up in Detroit, Michigan. Unfortunately, right now, 3 weeks from now, 21 days from this recording, the Panthers are not expected to be on the clock on Thursday evening in Detroit. Now, that could change. We'll see whether Dan Morgan has a trick up his sleeve to not give up too much compensation for the Panthers to get up and to get a premium player in the first round. I don't think it's worth the squeeze. Now, we will talk about it at some point in time over the next couple of weeks. As it is draft season, we have to talk about nothing but the draft, and the content machine is always churning, and I'll probably run out of things to say and thoughts that I have, so that will probably be something we go over. So I should probably write that down here in my notes live here on the show. But there was a move made on Wednesday morning that led a couple Panther fans to ask me, why didn't the Panthers make that trade? Why weren't the Panthers interested in that player? The trade I'm talking about is a trade between the Bills and the Texans for Stefon Diggs. Now, the Houston Texans have received Stefon Diggs and a 2024 6th-round pick and a 2025 5th-round pick, while the Bills receive a 2025 2nd-round pick, which the Texans got in a trade via the Minnesota Vikings. So Houston gave up a 2nd-round pick next year from a team that they got to pick from, while the Houston Texans receive the Stefon Diggs, a former All-Pro, a 6th-rounder this year, and a 5th-rounder next year. Buffalo had to give up more than they received in return, and the return's not even until next year. Of course, the Bills could use that to potentially move up if they wanted to get a wide receiver, or in any other kind of situational trade that they wanted to make over the next 3 weeks leading up to the draft. I don't know, but looking at it, that's a pretty advantageous trade for a team in the Houston Texans that have been all in on this offseason and trying to take a team that went surprisingly to the divisional round to maybe having them as legitimate AFC championship contenders, as long as Patrick Mahomes exists and Josh Allen exists. Although the Bills are wounded this offseason, it will be difficult for anyone to come out of the AFC. And I probably shouldn't even mention Josh Allen, as the Bills have not come out of the AFC since Patrick Mahomes has been in Kansas City. So you understand the point overall. That's not a trade that the Houston Texans had to give a lot up for. We talked about L'Jarius Sneed and what the Titans gave up for him. We talked about what Brian Burns was traded away for from the Giants. It hasn't been crazy compensation at all, which makes you think that shouldn't the Panthers be involved in trying to get one of these veteran wide receivers? Now, as far as Stefon Diggs goes, I'm good there. I think Diggs is a good player. Don't get me wrong. I've always been a fan. I really don't care. And I had somebody who was saying something to me about, oh, this is not even that great of a deal if you look at it because of Diggs' attitude and yada, yada, yada. He's still a great player. Now, did he have the best season this past year? Certainly not. I still think at age 30, turns 31 in late November, that Houston's still going to get a lot of Stefon Diggs. I think he can probably get this year and next year out of him. I don't know what his contract situation is. I do think he still is a good player. And when you look at your young quarterback, that's absolutely helpful for CJ Stroud. That's my main takeaway from this trade. It's not whether the Panthers should have been involved. It's what the Houston Texans offense looks like around CJ Stroud. You have Joe Mixon, who they traded for, then handed a contract to, which is insane because he's a running back. Stefon Diggs, who they just brought in. Nico Collins, who was a breakout star last year, who they had already drafted prior to bringing CJ Stroud in to Houston. I don't think anyone outside of Houston saw that coming. And I'm sure there's people within the Houston market, whether they're part of the team or not, who were surprised by the output put up by Nico Collins last year in Houston. Tank Dell, they took him in the third round. The Panthers, they drafted Jonathan Mingo in the second round. He gave them nothing. Tank Dell gave them a lot until he broke his leg later on in that season. While the Panthers took Hayden Hurst, the Texans got Dalton Schultz, and then they brought him back this year. I look at what has been put around CJ Stroud and compare that to Bryce Young. That's my takeaway from this trade, not necessarily whether Stefon Diggs is a good player or not. I couldn't give a rip whether he's a good player or not. He hasn't played in Carolina. He's not going to be a Carolina Panther. Maybe he could be, but I don't think he's going to be a Carolina Panther. So I don't really care whether he's good or not. But what I do care about is how they're constructing an offense around Bryce Young. They have done as good of a job as you could have hoped so far this offseason by paying Damian Lewis and paying Robert Hunt. I was reading The Athletic earlier today, and they have anonymous scouts out there and general managers, front office personnel talking about their thoughts on free agency. And they brought up how Hunt and Lewis, that was just the tax of being a bad team with the Panthers coming off of a 2-15 season. Whether you believe they overpaid or not, they shored up that position. And one of the criticisms of it was neither one of those players has been an all-pro. Who cares? Neither has Taylor Moton, and he's been a consistent player on this offensive line and isn't getting beat with regularity at right tackle. It's hardly ever happening. I don't need all pros. What I need is 5 guys who can stay healthy and 5 guys who can do their jobs, which was the case in 2022, where the Panthers didn't have any all-pro offensive linemen, but they had 5 guys stay healthy and 5 guys who did the damn thing. That's what we need in Carolina. And I think with Hunt and with Lewis, combined with Corbett at center, Moton at right tackle, and Nicky at left tackle, the Panthers can do that. So they've done a good job there. Weapons-wise, it's lacking. Like, Mixon's a better player than Chuba Hubbard. Now, can Chuba Hubbard still have a good season this year? Absolutely. And Mixon's getting up there in age. It's possible that he could have a better season than Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard could have a better season than Joe Mixon. But looking at just what they've done, Mixon's been a better player. Stefon Diggs, clearly better player than, I guess, the Panthers' number one, Deontay Johnson, who I like. Nico Collins, better right now than what Thielen probably is going to be this year. And then Tank Dell, certainly better than Jonathan Mingo. And Dalton Schultz, better than Tommy Trimble. Looking overall at the offensive playmakers, they have better playmakers. They have a better situation made for CJ. Now, you can argue the Panthers should have taken CJ and then they would be in a better situation by having a better quarterback, but I still believe in Bryce, and I still think it's too early to make any sort of determination of whether they got it wrong by not taking CJ Stroud. Right now, yes, certainly seems that way. But at the end of the day, will that be the case? I don't know. What I do know is they need more playmakers, and they should be interested in still trying to trade for a veteran prior to the draft in 3 weeks' time. I look at this trade, and I'm not sorry the Panthers didn't make it. If anything, I'm looking at what Houston's done to surround their quarterback with talent, with the skill makers as far as that goes, and what the Panthers so far have done with their young quarterback and what they've surrounded him with playmaker-wise. I like Deontay Johnson. I think Thielen still has something to give this year. The rest of the receiving core, I'm not enamored with. Tight end, I'm not a believer in Trimble, and I do think with Hunt and Lewis and Corbett healthy, and of course of Icky and Taylor, they're going to be able to run the football this year. I'm not concerned about that at all, and I'm not overly concerned about who's running the football anyways, because the Panthers have gotten production out of Mike Davis when McCaffrey's hurt. They got production out of Deontay Foreman. They've gotten production out of Chuba Hubbard. They don't have to spend money on running backs. The guys they've had, the bargain players have done plenty good for them over the last couple of seasons. That's my takeaway. What the Houston Texans have done to surround their quarterback with playmakers compared with the Panthers surround their quarterback with playmakers or lack thereof. I don't think they need to make this trade. I don't think any Panther fans should be upset. And let's understand the psyche of some Panther fans out there. There were people who were upset the Panthers didn't trade for Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, what has he done? Just go ask Steve Smith Sr. He'll let you know. All right. So with that being said, I still feel like they should potentially be in the market. So should the Panthers Or will the Panthers draft a wide receiver or trade for a wide receiver prior to the draft? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. So the Panthers didn't trade for Stefon Diggs. Whatever. Who cares? And anyone who's sitting here saying how, oh, well, good, they don't have to worry about him being a diva, his attitude, they must have forgotten or missed the exploits of Deontay Johnson up in Pittsburgh. You missed that? I'm not concerned about it. Two guys who want the football, who want to make plays and can make plays. And when they don't get the football and they're not making plays and their team's not winning, what do you know? They're upset. That is the nature of every single wide receiver in the history of the NFL. That's just the way these things work at that position. Give me the damn ball, show me the money, I'm happy. But some of you just can't understand that concept. It's just too difficult for you to grasp. And you like to criticize Diggs when there's a player already on your roster who's done a lot of the same things and has not been even half the player Stefon Diggs has been so far in his career. Just a thought there. Now, here's the question that I want to pose to you, and I'm really posing to myself as I'm thinking out loud on this podcast today. Will the Panthers trade for a wide receiver ahead of the draft? I was over on Bleach Report on Wednesday afternoon doing a live stream as they asked me to come on and give them an update on potential trades and draft targets for the Panthers heading into the draft in 3 weeks' time. And I had discussion about the Diggs trade and the Panthers not making that trade and said all the things I just said to you on that stream. And I still feel like right now, if the Panthers are going to trade for any wide receiver, and that even included Stefon Diggs, and yes, Jerry Jeudy, the Panthers should go after Tee Higgins. Again, though, the Bengals really don't have any incentive in my mind. And this is someone who's not a Bengals fan, not covering the Bengals. I'm just looking at it from an outside perspective of a guy who would love to see Tee Higgins here. I just don't see how that benefits the Bengals in 2024. Long term, maybe it does benefit them determining what the draft compensation could be. Looking at what Burns was traded for, what L'Jarius Sneed was traded for, what Diggs was traded for, may not cost all that much anyways, and they could just wait. One of the big things a lot of people brought up about L'Jarius Sneed being traded away from Kansas City over to Tennessee was that, okay, the Chiefs, they're going to get a comp pick from him leaving, but they could have already gotten a comp pick. They could have had him for, okay, let me start this over. They get a draft pick. That's going to come up next year for trading away L'Jarius Sneed. They could have just waited for L'Jarius Sneed to play this year, then leave, and they get a comp pick down the road. So they get one less year of L'Jarius Sneed, and then the pick's not until next year anyway. So how does it really help your team this year? That's the way that a lot of people looked at it. And it's similar to the Bengals. Okay, you could trade away Tee Higgins and get a pick in this year's draft, but it does not replace what you have in a veteran receiver when you're still in your Super Bowl window. Now, according to Joe Burrow, as long as he's in Cincinnati, the window's open. Now, the financials of the NFL don't necessarily allow that to happen. I believe that's the case in Kansas City. We sat here all year long and looked at the wide receivers in KC and questioned whether they could do it. We've seen all the guys they let out the wind at the door. They didn't have a great defense until this year. And what they do? They won a second Super Bowl in this as many years. 3 now for Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, KC, as long as Pat's there, I believe it. Joe, I want to believe it too. But that's just not the nature of the league, man. And people get hurt. He got hurt last year. And that's the second time he's had a significant injury and missed significant time in his NFL career. You have to understand that. So there's only going to be so many opportunities for the Cincinnati Bengals to really be in their Super Bowl window. And I look at this year that this would be it. With Chase back and with Tee Higgins, you already lost Joe Mixon, whatever, running back. I would think that they would want to keep him. And I brought this up before last year. Jonah Williams, he was upset that they had brought in Orlando Brown Jr. and he was going to be the starting left tackle, and Williams had to play right tackle. He wanted to be traded. And the Bengals said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to placate you being in your feelings. We're trying to win football games. And he stuck around, played well at right tackle. Now he's out in the desert with a bad team in Arizona playing left tackle. So congrats, you got what you wanted. But now you're probably not contending for anything other than being the worst team in the NFC West in the interim, if you're Jonah Williams. I could see the same situation playing out where Tee Higgins is upset they haven't spoken in a year, which is kind of crazy that you wouldn't even try to talk to the guy. And I have mentioned this again on the podcast before, that the main person I'm focused on, wide receiver-wise, if I'm Cincinnati, it's Jamar Chase. I'm not necessarily all that focused on Tee Higgins. I got the Burrow deal done. I want to get Jamar Chase done, and then maybe T. And they still have until mid-July to figure this out. They could wait till then. I would think that the smartest time to do it would be like now, maybe in 3 weeks with the draft coming up, so that if they do decide to move off of Tee Higgins, with Tyler Boyd also being a free agent, I don't think he's signed anywhere yet, that they're not going to be sitting here with a completely reworked wide receiver group when they could be. But I don't think you want to wait till July when there's not options available. There will be options for them available in the draft in a deep wide receiver class to boot. So if they're going to do it, why not do it now? That's the trade I'm looking at that the Panthers should make, is Tee Higgins. You can give him a third. You can give, and I did this mock draft on Bleacher Report, and I did the PFF mock draft simulator, and it would not let me give a third round pick. And I just want to tell PFF, guys, are you seeing the trades that are happening? Are you seeing what Burns went for, what Steen went for, and now what Diggs went for? I think you can let me give up a third round pick and not a second round pick and make the trade happen. Just based off of, well, I don't know, reality of what's been happening in the NFL. That's the trade. Now, will they make it? It doesn't feel like it's going to happen. Now, the fact that I said that means it may happen now because I put it out in the universe that it won't. An egg is always on my face whenever I say these things. I don't speak in absolutes anymore after the Cam Newton situation, and only a Sith speaks in absolutes. But still, I don't get the feeling that that's happening right now. Now, could it happen once we get a little bit closer to the draft? Sure. And I hope it happens. And I think that would be the best thing for the Panthers. There's also the argument of Tee Higgins 4 years ago was drafted 33rd overall. The Panthers have the 33rd pick. Why not draft another Tee Higgins? Especially if a guy like A.D. Mitchell is available. Or Keon Coleman, who I like. But really an A.D. Mitchell, who a lot of people think are going in the first round, if somehow he falls, run, sprint, fly to the podium and get that man in black and blue. So if the Panthers don't end up adding another wide receiver and it's just Deontay Johnson who they added, and they still have Thielen and Mingo and Terrace Marshall for now, should they double dip at wide receiver in the second round at 33 and 39? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind of your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal of out-hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. And State fans, get your ass to Phoenix, man. Go to the Final Four with Game Time. I have a friend who texted me the other day, State grad, and this is the guy who wasn't a State fan until he stepped on campus there and all the bricks in West Raleigh. And he was telling me, I'm only going to go if they play in the title game on Monday. And I get it Burns versus Edie, we can't wait. And it feels like 83, but actually it feels like 24. It's a Smailco run. Don't wait. Get out to the desert now. Besides, if you get tickets, you get to go to both games. Why not go see UConn blow out Alabama? So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. It's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophies. Also, it keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, of all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Looking at the draft, we talked about it earlier this week. The draft needs for the Carolina Panthers: wide receiver, edge. Those are the top two. I even said corner is the top two. And I had a conversation with someone who we'll speak to on Monday. I had this conversation on Wednesday, a nice little tease. We're going to have an NFL draft analyst from the Worldwide Leader join us on Monday for the show. And he was telling me that he doesn't think the Panthers should be targeting a corner early, maybe later on in the draft, but really his top three were center, along with edge and with wide receivers. So we talk about the draft needs, the primary needs, the secondary needs, and then, hell, you can't blame them if they decide to go out there and do it needs, as there's some positions, especially defensively, where you closer look, okay, maybe the Panthers should be interested in this guy. The unfortunate thing is they only have so many picks. It's not like they can fill every single need they have on the roster, and you have to understand positional value and all that kind of stuff, like draft stock, which is not really a thing. There's no such thing as draft stock. It's just how people value who this guy is. There's no draft stock market out there in the world, but still, you understand the positional value and all that yada, yada, yada draft talk that we hear throughout this time of the year. You like a guy, you take the guy. If he's good for you, does it really matter what you gave up for him? Where you picked him? No, not to me, at least. But I'm not a draft Nick. I'm not one of those guys who breaks it down like a science. But looking at things, the Panthers are only going to be able to bring in Deontay Johnson and bring in Adam Thielen, or have Adam Thielen back as their top receivers. And they have Terrace Marshall on the roster for now. They have Jonathan Mingo, who didn't give him much last year, but is back. And the hope is, with this new coaching staff and with his physical tools, that he can be a better contributor this year. Should they be interested potentially in adding not one, but two wide receivers in a second round this year at 33 and at 39? There is an argument for them to do this. If you look at Thielen and at Johnson, contract-wise, Adam Thielen's on a 3-year deal. But after the season, the Panthers, they could move on. And do you really – we have to see how it goes, but are you really wanting Adam Thielen at age 35 to be back here next year? Or would you rather have a younger player in that position? Would you rather have 35-year-old Adam Thielen or second-year Ladd McConkey or Troy Franklin or whoever your favorite second-round wide receiver is? Would you rather have them or Thielen? That's just a question for you. Deontay Johnson, as much as I would like for the Panthers to be able to keep him around if he plays well this season, there's no guarantee that will happen. Why is that, Julian? Look at the other players on the roster. Derek Brown. They're talking to Drew Rosenhaus's agent about getting a deal done, but we don't have an extension right now. And until there's not an extension, that is going to remain something that's up in the air, and that we should question whether the Panthers will get it done just based off of the recent history of how they've treated successful first-round picks. That's unfortunate, but that's the narrative that I'm going with, at least, and I believe is out there. Until that gets done, there's questions of whether he'll be around long-term. This is the last year for Derek Brown playing on that fifth-year option. I think he'll be around, but I need to see it pen to paper before it truly is reality of the situation that we're living in right now as Panther fans and observers of the team. JC Horn, they have less than a month or maybe even a month to figure out what to do with the fifth-year option. If they accept it, then he's here through next season. If they say no, this is his last year. And let's say they don't get a deal done with Derek Brown and they don't pick up the fifth-year option. Both of those guys are free agents next year. And Deontay Johnson's also free agent. So who are you going to franchise tag? Johnson, Horn, or Brown? I don't think it's going to come to this, but I do look at a situation down in Jacksonville where they couldn't get a deal done with Josh Allen, their edge rusher, and that led Calvin Ridley to get to the market, and then Ridley signed with a division rival who dropped a bag in front of him. The Panthers can't put themselves in that situation. You don't want to be picking and choosing on who you're able to keep and who you're not. They wanted to keep Frankie Louvu, and I'm sure they wanted to find a way to keep Brian Burns. Neither one of those players are here. And it's not impossible that like 11 months from now, that the Panthers are in the same situation where they don't have Burns. They can't keep him. They can franchise tag one of these guys, or they can't be able to keep all of them. So if you look at it, it's a possibility. And I don't know how high it is that Deontay Johnson and Thielen are not Panthers next April heading into the draft. With that thought, it would make sense to double dip. And just thinking long-term, Thielen's not in the long-term plans. Johnson can be in the long-term plans, and we'll see how things work out with Mingo. Long-term, if you hit on 33 and 39, both those guys come in and they're studs, you fix your wide receiver position. Whether you keep Thielen and Johnson or not, you fixed your wide receiver spot. You have two guys who come in and help you. And I saw Josh Norris, who's Underdog Fantasy. He's a Charlotte guy, Elon guy as well. Does great work. Talking about the Panthers, talking about the NFL as a whole. He brought this up, probably like a month and a half ago. I think he said draft McConkey, draft somebody else, and boom, you're done. There you go, Panthers. You have your wide receivers for the next decade, feasibly, but probably not. But you have your next receivers for the next 4 or 5 years plus. That's the best way to look at it. I don't think it's a bad idea to double dip. Now, what about center? What about edge? Are there any edge rushers that are true difference makers? Would it make more sense to just take wide receivers? Now, best player available, what's your board say? If you get the 33 and your board says the best player available is a wide receiver, okay, you take him. You get 39, you're already taking a wide receiver, and your board says best player available is wide receiver. Are you going with that, or are you looking 2 players down at edge and being like, well, maybe we should do this? We'll see how it works out. This is a team that's largely devoid of talent in a lot of areas. They need to be best player available. We have the conversation about what they should do in these certain spots because that's what we do as fans and as podcast hosts and just general observers of this team that we all love. And it's the NFL draft cycle. We have to talk about something. We can't just say, yeah, BPA, that's it, move on. BPA meaning best player available. We have to have these conversations. We have the conversation today. So really what they should do is best player available. And if both those players who are available at the top of their board are wide receivers, I don't think it's that crazy, y'all, that they would do that, especially just thinking about what the future looks like for Johnson and with Thielen, and that still being a relative unknown heading into the draft in 3 weeks. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you tomorrow on Friday to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So either at me or DM me to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. I'll talk to y'all on Friday.